When we hit the bottom, nothing gonna stop us. Climb to the top with you. We could be the greatest ones who never made it. Yeah, I could be talking to you.
Last week, we started a brand new sermon series that we called Playlist. And it doesn't matter how old or young you are, whether you're male or female, everybody has a playlist. Whether it's your workout playlist loaded with songs with Rage Against the Machine or Metallica, or maybe it's your throwback playlist with some Wu-Tang Clan, or maybe you're a junior high girl and you can't go one day without listening to your breakup playlist where you're just crying to yourself like, I love him so much, and you got songs from The Weeknd or Taylor Swift, or maybe you're a guy and you have the same playlist. Hey, we don't judge, you know? Everybody has a playlist, right? But everybody also has that song. That one song that you could listen to over and over again and you could never get tired of it. And that song for me was the one you just heard, Don't You Worry About a Thing by Stevie Wonder. And the reason I love this song so much is because Stevie Wonder didn't just write it for the giggles, right? He was a man who went through an immense amount of stress in his life. He had so many things going on, it could have turned his world upside down. See, when Stevie Wonder was born, he was born 6 weeks premature. So the doctors put him in an incubator. And the oxygen-rich air caused something called ROP, which causes retinas to stop forming and detach. So before he even left the hospital, he was completely blind. But that never stopped Stevie Wonder. You see, during that time in the 1950s when you were blind, schools didn't have to take you. Jobs could reject your application all the way until 1975. But Stevie Wonder had a gift. Stevie Wonder was a musical prodigy. By the time he was around 8, he could play the piano, the harmonica, and the drums. When he was 9 years old, he formed a singing partnership with his friend John. And they would go around and they would sing at birthday parties and on street corners. But when he was 11, things changed in his life. See, when he was 11, he wrote a song that he had sang for a man named Ronnie White. And when Ronnie White heard this little boy sing, he was so blown back that he took Stevie Wonder and his mom to Motown Records to sing for the CEO, Berry Gordy. Berry Gordy signed Stevie Wonder immediately. And since then, Stevie Wonder has been a producer, a singer, a pianist, a civil rights activist, and so much more. But Stevie Wonder, he wasn't like the other kids. So he didn't have time to go to birthday parties or sleepovers, right? He had to worry about contract negotiations and royalties. He had to juggle school and being on the road. He was under contract. But in 1973, right after he'd gotten into an almost fatal car crash, Stevie Wonder wrote a song called Don't You Worry About a Thing. And for some of us, that's easier said than done, because we live in a time of stressed out people. You see, the American Institute of Stress did a study that said 77% of most people have so much stress in their life that they get physically affected by it. They have things like fatigue, anxiety, nervousness, all things that affect our day-to-day life. And that's not just for adults either. See, teenagers are even worse. The American Psychological Institute did a study that said teenagers are far more stressed out than adults because of things like bullying, fitting in, social media, getting into college, jobs, significant others, and the list goes on and on. See, maybe some of you, maybe you have kids, and every single day you wake up, it's breakfast, school, recital, basketball, dinner, homework, in that order. And if something goes wrong, oh my gosh, the world is gonna fall apart, right? Or maybe you're a student who's gotta worry about getting into your top pick of college. How are you gonna pay for that? Getting a job, all these things. The stress can be immense. But when we sit back and we think about this, everybody just wants to know, what do I do, right? What is the answer to this stress that I feel every single day? You know what's crazy? The Bible has something to say about this exact same problem. You see, one of the common denominators that we see all throughout Scripture are people who deal with immense amount of stress and anxiety. See, Joseph was worried about his leadership ability. Gideon was worried God would answer his prayers. Moses was worried about leading the Jewish people out of Egypt. Peter was frazzled because of his denial, and Paul was possessed by his past. Over and over in Scripture, we see one person after another who dealt with the very same issues that so many of us do in our day-to-day life. So what do? We know everybody deals with it back in the Bible and even today in 2018. So what do we do? Does the Bible have anything to say about what we face? The Bible has more to say about this topic than you could possibly imagine. And this morning, we're going to look at a verse of Scripture where Jesus gives us the remedy for our anxiety. He gives us the antidote that so many of us need for the stress that we feel. But before we look at this verse, I want to take a step back and look at the history a little bit so it makes sense. You see, history tells us that the Roman Empire was founded by Romulus and Remus in 753 BC. And they had the goal of becoming the most powerful nation in the world. But not too long after they began their quest for world domination, Rome became very interested in ruling Israel. Now, the reason they were so interested in Israel is because that part of Palestine was an important crossroads between Europe, Asia, and Africa. And if they could have this patch of land, they could go freely between all these areas. But at this time, the Jewish people were defined by their temple practices, their worship, and their belief in the one God, Jehovah. And the Roman Empire, they knew this was going to be very hard to extinguish. So they devised a plan, a compromise that they told the Jewish people. They said, you can continue to worship your God as long as you pay your taxes, keep the peace, and follow the rules. But this was nothing more than a massive mind game, because the Roman Empire made the Jewish people believe that their right to worship God was something given to them by Caesar Augustus, and he could take it away at any moment. But the Jewish people, they weren't just under political pressure. They were also under spiritual pressure. You see, at this time in history, the Jewish people, the leaders, the teachers, they told the Jewish people that if you don't follow the rules, if you don't do what we tell you to, then you will fall short. And you will never be with God. So they were under constant rules and regulations, believing that if they didn't follow these rules, they weren't going to ever be good enough. And a lot of us feel that way. You know, we're under this stress of not being good enough, not being thin enough, smart enough, fast enough. But then something very strange happens. You see, Jesus is going through Palestine. He's telling the people the truth about God's love. And he goes to the people and he says something very, very peculiar, something that caught everybody's attention. Look at what Jesus says in Matthew 11:28. He says, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Now I want to stop right there and pump the brakes and look at these words a little bit deeper. Because Jesus was standing in a huge crowd of people, and he immediately catches their attention by saying this. He says, hey, for those of you, everyone who's feeling weary, exhausted, burdened, tired, all these words, spent, all of you who lived your entire life feeling like you aren't good enough, I want you to do something different. I want you to follow me. I want you to walk in my direction. Because if you simply come and walk with me, you're not going to find judgment. You're not going to find a bunch of rules, regulation, and pressure. You're going to find rest. In other words, all that emotional weight you've been carrying for your whole life, you can lay that down. You can take it off your shoulders. And whether you know it or not, that's one of the most amazing promises God gives us in Scripture. Because so many of us, students and adults, spend our entire life trying to live up to everyone's expectations. So Jesus says, all right, this is the starting line. I want you to walk in my direction. But that's not all he says. He doesn't just stop right there and leave it be. He goes on to tell us why. Look at what Jesus said in verse 29. He said, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." Now, when I first read this verse, when I was writing this sermon, I had no idea what this meant. In my mind, I read yoke. I'm like, all right, eggs. That's cool. That's holy food. All right. No, that's not what it means at all right? In the New Testament, there's two meanings for the word yoke. The first one is a wooden crosspiece they would put on cows in order to plow a field. But the second one is completely different. See, when you would want to learn more about God and about religion, you'd go to a rabbi, and you'd ask this rabbi, "Put your yoke upon me." And what this meant is this rabbi would give you all the religious knowledge they had, but that was a heavy burden to carry, because not only did you have to go to other rabbis and see how they taught and tell them how they were wrong, you had to spend countless hours memorizing texts and scriptures and devote your whole life to this. But Jesus tells the Jewish people something different. He says, "My yoke, it's not a heavy burden. To walk with me, to know the truth about God's love, it's not something that is going to weigh you down for the rest of your life. It's not something that's going to pressure you." And I know there's problems and circumstances and everything that you worry about in order to follow me. No, you don't have to worry about those things, because I'm going to walk with you. You're going to walk with me. And if you simply learn the truth, you'll understand that everything that goes on around you is nothing compared to an eternity with God. You will realize, and you know how I know this is true? I know that this is true without a doubt, because last week we came back from Summer in the Sun, which is a youth camp in Kentucky, right? We were there for a week, and we took 75 students, about half of which didn't know the truth about God's love, and went through every single stress you could imagine. We took these students, and we brought them down there, and they talked about the theme of greater than. How God is greater than things like doubt, fear, discontent, and worry. God is greater than all these things that go on in everyone's life. And we had 13 kids, and we're going to have 6 more give their life to Christ during that week. Because they realized something. They thought to themselves, everything that I go through, the bullying, the stresses at home, finances, divorce, all that stuff, in the grand scheme, it doesn't matter, because I'm going to walk with God. I'm going to give my life to Christ, and he's going to have my back. And all these students, they started walking towards God. But the truth is, this lesson isn't only for kids at Summer in the Sun. It's not for 16-year-old, 18-year-olds. It's for people who've been feeling stressed and anxiety for 20, 30, 40 years, 60 years. For everybody. Every single person in this room, this is the remedy that Jesus gives us. And we know it's true because that's what the Bible tells us. And it can happen to anybody. This feeling when you walk with God of taking this weight off your shoulders, it can happen to anybody without even realizing. You see, when I started high school, I had this crazy goal of graduating high school and college at the same time. So I had to get into this college program at Lakeland and go through it, and I did. And for 3 years, I had countless sleepless nights and early mornings working towards this goal. And there were a lot of times where I just felt like I couldn't keep my head above the water. But there was one time in particular, one time where I felt like the world was just crashing around me. It was my senior year, finals week. I'd finished all my finals. I looked at my grades. I'm like, all right, I'm in the clear. Then later that night, I was like, you know what? I'll check my grades again, just to be sure, right? I wasn't sure about myself. And I looked through my grades, and I saw in a math class, there was a test that I had taken the beginning of the semester. Didn't put it in yet until that last minute, and I'd bombed that test. So that took my math grade from a C down to an F. And I was absolutely devastated. Because for any of you who know me, I am horrible at math. That's why I'm up here. That's why I'm preaching. I'm not good at math, all right? It is, yeah, it's always been a struggle for me. But it was very disconcerting. And I was like, wow, I spent 3 years. 3 years working, 3 years missing parties, family events, all the fun I could have been having, and I have nothing to show for it. And some of us know exactly how that feels because you are working and you, for a long time, you're just trying to make partner, right? Just trying to make partner in your company. You're trying to get that raise. You're spending that whole day working, exhausting yourself, missing dates, and all types of things. And then in the end, you got nothing to show for it. All that work for nothing. And after a few days of basically self-loathing, I was like, you know what? I took a step back. I read this verse, and I thought to myself, I'm here. I have a job. I work at Velocity. I have clothes on my back. I have food. I was like, you know what? If I got to take summer classes, so be it. If I got to do this and that, I mean, whatever. But I'm going to walk with God. I'm not going to let this deter me from doing something that I love, which is coming up here, doing sermons, being a youth pastor, all that stuff. I'm going to walk with God. I'm going to go in his direction because I know he has me. I know in my heart that he has my back, and that if I'll walk with him in his direction and realize that this is greater than anything that's going on, I'll get through it. And amazingly enough, about a week after I get my transcripts from my college, I'm like, all right, here it is, the big bill and all that stuff. And I look at my transcripts and I see this math class, and just by literally a percent, I passed this class. I had a D. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. What do you know? Yeah. And I was like, to me, it felt like a miracle because I was like, I know I failed that class. It was like, all right. And that's where it stood true for me. That's where these words stood true for me. Because I walked with God, I focused on that. I was like, God has my back through all this stuff. And you know what's crazy? Stevie Wonder, he may have known the truth about God's love. He may have not. But even Stevie Wonder knew, and he says it in his song. Don't you worry about a thing, because I'll be standing on the side when you check it out. He knew that when you're going through everything that life has to throw at you, the stresses and the anxieties, if you have somebody to walk with you through all that, to be with you, to help you, it's like taking weights right off your shoulders. And if he knew that just by a person walking with you, then I can't imagine what it's like to have Jesus and God walking with you in that direction through everything that goes on in life. That's right. God, I pray that, everyone here, I know it's summer, so for students, they don't have to worry about school, but when the school year starts and everything starts around, I pray that you'll be with everybody, that you'll walk with them and help them take these weight off their shoulders because it can get hard, every single day waking up 9 to 5 in the office and stressing out over everything, the staff meeting at 3 o'clock and the presentation you got later that day, getting into college or school, getting the 4.0, it can get to be a lot. And I pray that you'll just be there, or everybody remembers that you promise us that you will give us rest for our bodies and our souls. And God, I also want to pray for the Mentor policeman who just lost his life. I know that he was a friend to a lot of people here and a very good guy. And I pray that for everybody who's dealing with that loss, that you can be with them also and walk with them. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.